Hi, World History. This is Miss Corey. Welcome to U8-L1 review of Semester 1. Learning standards. Students will be able to refresh their brains about what we learned in Semester 1, which is Units 1 through 7. You're going to watch this video and answer the questions that are in blue text directly on the Ed puzzle. All right, so far this semester, we have had 7 units. Unit 1 being the Fertile Crescent in Mesopotamia, Unit 2 being Ancient Egypt and Judaism, Unit 3 being Ancient Greece, Unit 4 being Ancient Rome, Unit 5 China and Japan, Unit 6 India, and Unit 7 Islam and pre and post-Islamic Africa. So I probably mentioned this at the very beginning of the semester, but social studies is getting new standards. This year I started tweaking my units to fit those new standards. So this year, you guys did a lot of assignments that were new to both me and, of course, you as well. So thank you for sticking through those assignments. This unit, which is Unit 8, is going to be one of those new things that we're doing that I've never done before. So we'll see how it goes. But before we talk about that, let's kind of talk about a review of what we've learned about so far this year. So here is a list of the units we've gone through. So which unit was your favorite and why? And you don't have to tell me like a whole paragraph of why, just like a sentence or something like that works. All right. Then let's ask the opposite. Which unit was your least favorite and why? Which formative, like those are the day-to-day assignments that we have, has been your favorite and why? And then which formative or day-to-day assignment has been your least favorite and why? All right. Then which summative assignment has been your favorite and why? And if you don't remember all the summative assignments we've done, I do have them listed up here. So Unit 1, we did an infographic. Unit 2, we did the Pharaoh Research Project. Unit 3, we did the trifold brochure. Unit 4, we did the pen pal letter. Unit 5, we did the Chinese technology project. Unit 6, we did the magazine cover / infographic. And then Unit 7, we did the podcast summative. And then, of course, the flip to that is which summative assignment has been your least favorite and why? All right. Any other comments about the semester so far? And if you don't have any, that's a-okay. You can just type none. All right. So let's get started with a very brief review of the semester. This will be helpful for the rest of the assignments for this week. So in Unit 1, we talked about the Fertile Crescent and Mesopotamia. So name one thing you remember from Unit 1. I know, it seems like a long time ago, but it really wasn't that long ago if you think about it. So we started off with lesson 1 and 2 being the incredible human journey with this lady right here. Her name's Dr. Alice Roberts. We talked about humans leaving Africa, the debate about what routes that these humans took, also human adaptability. Lesson 3 and 4, we did the first people Americas, if you remember this right here. We talked about the Bering Strait of where the first people may have come from the Asia side to the North America side. We talked about the Kennewick Man, the Clovis Point as well. In lesson 5, we talked about the rise of agriculture, which we talked about hunter-gatherers, global warming, cycle effects of more food, which means that there could be more population, Çatal and domestication. Lesson 6 was Bronze Age, Babylonia, Anatolia, and Assyria, which of course we talked about the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, Babylonia, Anatolia, Assyria, as well as cuneiform tablets. If you remember those, there's that picture that we talked about. And then lesson 7 was this yellow slideshow with like the 5 little pie pieces. That was the 5 main characteristics of a civilization. So we talked about complex institutions, advanced cities, advanced technologies, record keeping, and specialized workers. All right. Then we go on to Unit 2, which was Ancient Egypt and Judaism. Name one thing you remember from Unit 2. So we started off with lesson 1, which is Intro to Egypt, Old and Middle Kingdom. We talked about dynasties, mono and polytheism, pharaohs, pyramids, Nubia, trade and annexation, the fortress of Buhin. In lesson 2, we did the New Kingdom. That's where we talked about the Valley of the King, Hyksos, Akhenaten. So if you remember Akhenaten, he was this pharaoh that was really kind of weird. And he changed the art style of all of ancient Egypt as well as the religion to these more alien looking people. And then we talked about Tutankhamun as well. Lesson 4 was the Book of the Dead and how that was important to the Egyptian religion. Lesson 5, we talked about the basics of Judaism. Then we go on to Unit 3, which was ancient Greece. So tell me one thing you remember about Unit 3. So we actually started off this unit not talking about ancient Greece, and instead we started off talking about the Persian Empire. So that was lesson 1, Persian Empire. We talked about Cyrus, Darius the First, Xerxes, as well as Zoroastrianism. In lesson 2, we talked about the geography of ancient Greece. Lesson 3 was ancient Greece basics. That's where we talked about Greek mythology, the resources that the Greeks had, city-state slash polis, Acropolis, Agora. And at the end, we took kind of that little fun, I don't even want to call it like a quiz, but an activity where we compared the US and Athens democracies. In lesson 4, we had Athens versus Sparta reading, which took a little bit deeper dive into the society of ancient Greece, where we talked about warfare, holidays, the arts, as well as gender roles. Lesson 5, we did the first Olympics. So in that little documentary, we talked about what sports were played, training, what religious roles were like, but also gender roles as well. In lesson 6, we talked about Alexander the Great. So we talked about Macedonia, King Philip, SPA, if you remember what that is, what that stands for. So SPA stands for Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, which were 3 huge philosophers back in ancient Greece. I mean, they're so popular that they're even known across a lot of population today. We, of course, talked about Alexander the Great, who we nicknamed Alex, and Hellenization, which was the spreading of Greek culture. In lesson 7, we did Engineering and Empire, Ancient Greece, Age of Alexander, and we talked about some of the technologies that were made during this time period. All right, then we're on to Unit 4, Ancient Rome. Tell me one thing you remember about Unit 4. Yeah, maybe you remember the weird, creepy dog and baby statue. Maybe that's what you remember, which is fine. Uh, in lesson 1, we talked about the rise of Rome. So we talked about how Rome started first off as a state. It then turned into a republic with kings. After that, it went to an empire. We talked about Palatine Hill, Romulus and Remus. In lesson 2, we talked about the Roman emperor's video choice. So we learned more about Nero, Caligula, Vespasian, and Valerian. In lessons 3 and 4, we talked about the Roman city. So that was diving more into architecture of the city, such as the aqueducts, the city layouts, the arc, as well as technologies. In lesson 5 and 6, we did What is Christianity and Christianity in the Roman Empire. So we watched one of those really cheesy 1990s videos, which again, I know are super cheesy, but they really do a good job explaining the basics of Christianity. We also talked about disciples, the Bible relationship between Christianity and Judaism, early Christians, women in Christianity, and catacombs. Lesson 7 and lesson 8, we watched that super awesome documentary about gladiators. At least I thought it was super awesome. And in there, we talked about, well, of course, gladiators, who they were, but also Priscus and Varus storyline, which are these 2 guys right here, and how Colosseum games worked in general. Lesson 9, we did the Ancient Rome video choice. That's where you could learn more about Roman women, teen life in Rome, the 4 sisters. If you watch that one, they were all named Numidia. And then we also talked about the Vestal Virgins. In lesson 10, the fall of Rome and the rise of the Byzantine Empire. That was about splitting the east and west of the Roman Empire. Diocletian, who was the emperor who did that. Constantine, who's this dude right here. Constantinople, which is the new Roman capital that he made after himself. And Constantine's influence on the early Christian church. You probably remember this slide too about the origins of Christianity. So we talked about Judaism and how from Judaism sprang Christianity. All right, Unit 5. We went on a other side of the world with China and Japan. So name one thing you remember about Unit 5. So we started off with lessons 1 and 2, the first people Asia. We talked about the migration to Asia, artifacts, also DNA testing. Lesson 3 was ancient China basics. That's where we talked about the Shang period, the horses, the Zhou period, the Han dynasty. And lesson 4, that was the rise and fall of the Mongol Empire. So we talked about the Mongol Empire, of course, and Genghis Khan being this like super like powerful overlord of the Mongol Empire. In lesson 5, we did ancient Japan, Heian, and shogunate. So we talked about the Shinto religion, Heian period, emperor versus shogun, samurai, daimyo, and the West meets Japan. Lesson 6 was Women in Japan reading. That was the Pillow Book by Sei Shonagon. In lesson 7, we talked about the Silk Road. So that was one of the crash course videos by John Green. And we talked about how, like, what items were traded along the Silk Road, how it was traded, and that the Silk Road was not just one singular road, but instead it was a bunch of routes, kind of as you can see up here on this map. And they weren't just land routes as well, they included sea routes. And then you finish that off with the Chinese technology project. In Unit 6, we have India. So name one thing you remember about Unit 6. So in lessons 1, 3, 4, 5, and 6, we did India basics, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, and Jainism. So in those, we talked about the subcontinent, Indus and Ganges River, monsoon, the Harappan society, Vedas, the caste system, as well as the religions of Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. Lesson 2, we talked about what can we learn from artifacts. So we did a deeper dive into what artifacts have popped up in the Harappan civilizations. And in lesson 7, we did growing up as an untouchable. So that was more of a modern resource by Pradesh. And she's talking about what it was like in like the 60s and 70s, like the 1960s and 70s, growing up in India as being on the bottom of the caste system. All right. Then we have Unit 7, which is Islam in pre/post-Islamic Africa. So name one thing you remember about Unit 7. And this should be pretty easy because we literally just got done with this unit. All right. In lessons 1, we talked about Islam basics, as well as what is Islam. Um, so we talked about the Islamic basic beliefs, everyday lives of American Muslims, which we saw in like that 1990s cheesy video. Muhammad, how Muhammad, there's like no pictures or like artwork of him. Connections to the Abrahamic religions, the 5 pillars of Islam, the Quran, the mosque, the Hajj, and the Caliphate. And lesson 3 was the early Islamic Empire. So that was how Islam spread and conquered parts of Africa, Middle East, and parts of Europe. In lesson 4, we talked about the Ottoman Empire reading and quiz. So we learned who the Ottomans were, what a sultan is, the Ghazis, Mehmed II, Suleiman the Lawgiver, Devshirme, and the Janissaries. And then we rounded it off with lesson 6, lesson 7, lesson 8, which is Africa's Great Civilizations, hosted by this guy here. He's Henry Gates Jr. Yes. And he traveled around Africa looking at all these like older civilizations, talking about the gold trade, cities, the spread of Islam and Christianity, what universities, books, libraries, who Prester John was, which was this like interesting Christian mythological character. Also conflicts with Europeans at the very, very end in lesson 8. You might remember this slide here. So this was the 3 Abrahamic religions. So like we just talked about, from Judaism sprang Christianity, and then from Christianity sprang Islam. All 3 of these religions are considered Abrahamic religions, meaning they believe in the same God. All right. That was a lot to review. Oh my gosh. Now, let me explain why we had to review all of this. No, there's not some giant test coming up. Trust me, I would not do that to you, okay? So, you will answer this learning standard for world history. It says, consider what it means to have a successful society and examine how some societies have adapted to social, environmental, and/or political changes. Evaluate whether these adaptations can be applied to human society today. You're probably looking at this right here and going, what the heck? That's like a very large question. But do not worry, do not panic. I'm going to break this all down for you. So, next up, you're going to do U8-L2, Social Challenges Discussion Post. This will be a Schoology discussion post. You're going to choose one civilization studied in class, and you're going to identify at least 2 social challenges that society faced, okay? Social challenges. Example of social challenges include social structure and inequalities, gender roles or restrictions, which we talked a lot about gender roles. Pretty much every unit I made sure we talked about gender roles. Civil unrest and economic inequalities. Again, these are just some examples. It's not just like there's other examples of social challenges. These are just some big ones. So, in 2 complete sentences, you're going to describe how the society adapted to these challenges and explain their impacts. You're going to do that on the Schoology discussion post for U8-L2. Okay. U8-L3, political challenges discussion post. So, it's going to be very similar concept, okay? It's going to be a Schoology discussion post. You're going to choose one civilization studied in class. It can be a different one than you used in the social challenges, okay? It can be totally different. That's fine. You're going to identify at least 2 political challenges that society faced. For example, were there threats of invasion or war? Was it a rise and fall of civilization? Were there corruptions or rebellion? Was maintaining control over large empires or diverse populations difficult or a good thing? So, in 2 complete sentences, you are going to describe how the society adapted to these challenges and explain their impact. Okay? Again, this is political challenges. And then for U8-L4, that is environmental challenges discussion post. Same thing. It's going to be a Schoology discussion post. You're going to choose one civilization studied in class, and you're going to identify at least 2 environmental challenges. Okay? Environmental. The society faced. For example, you could talk about flooding or droughts, agriculture, harsh climates or natural disasters, resource scarcity, you could talk about like access to water as well. This one is probably, in my mind, probably the most challenging of the 3 discussion posts I'm going to ask of you. So if you need help with this or any of the discussion posts, please let me know. I'm more than happy to help you out, okay? So in 2 complete sentences, you're going to describe how the society adapted to these challenges and explain their impacts. All right, finally, we have the last assignment of this week and for Unit 8 in general. Again, it's going to be the Schoology discussion post. Answer the following question in the discussion post in at least 4 complete sentences. What does it mean for a society to be successful? And how have civilizations adapted to social, environmental, or political challenges to achieve it? So, here's my tip to you. Look back at your answers for lessons 2, 3, and 4 to answer this big question. So, if you see with all the questions I'm asking you before, I'm trying to build you up. So, when you get to this U8-L5 question, you already have a lot of examples that you could just use. Okay? All right. If you are stuck, if you are unsure, if you can't remember, if you have questions, please ask us. We are here to help you. That is literally our job. We love to help students, okay? Please ask for help. Next week, we'll be starting Unit 9, the Middle Ages. This will be a pretty quick unit with lots of info since we only have 2 weeks left of the semester after winter break. You're probably thinking, like, wait a minute. Wait, we have another unit after this? Then why are we doing a semester 1 unit wrap up? Ooh, that's a good question. So the reason why we're doing a unit 1 semester 1 unit wrap up now is because most of the in-person classes usually end at like the Islam and pre and post Africa unit. So that's why we're doing the wrap up now. And then we have 2 extra weeks, so we're gonna squeeze in the Middle Ages, so we don't have to do that next semester, and we can have more time next semester for, like, the World War II unit, because honestly, that's, like, the best unit, not gonna lie. So, again, if you have questions, let us know. We're happy to help. Alright, thanks for watching. Bye.